In the previous video in the Green Shift series, we saw all about the two Government of India notifications of June 2023 about carbon markets and a market for green credits. To quickly recap, the Carbon Credits Trading Scheme 2023 was brought in by the Ministry of Power, and the idea was to bring in a market for trading in carbon credits, and that basically sets out the framework within which the future carbon credits market would operate. Likewise, the draft guidelines for Green Credit Program implementation rules also sets out or seeks to set out a framework under which a market for green credits would operate in the future. These are two very important, significant steps in bringing in a vibrant Indian carbon market. But there is a lot of work to do. And now, in this video, we will take a close look at the potential challenges that the Government of India might face in bringing in these two markets. One big challenge the government will face is creation of demand. In any market for that matter, you should have supply as well as demand. In carbon credits, the supply is pretty much going to be there because the government is talking of imposing an obligation on obligated entities. Now, these obligated entities could be like say, cement sector, or steel sector, or the electricity sector, discoms, and these are sectors, and obligated entities could be the companies operating in these sectors. Now, the Government of India is talking of bringing in a cap and trade mechanism, as we discussed in the previous video. That means the government will fix a target, will fix an emissions limit that a company will need to adhere to. To take an example, the government may say, take a cement company, may say, okay, we will allow a cement company to emit 2 tons of carbon dioxide for every ton of cement you produce. Now, if a company produces 1 ton of cement and emits only, let us say, 1.5 tons of carbon dioxide instead of the allowed 2 tons of carbon dioxide, it gets carbon credit for half a ton of carbon dioxide it saved, which credit it can trade in the market. So it is pretty much given that all the obligated entities will scramble and do something to do better than the limit set, and therefore they will generate enough supply of carbon credits. Now the question here is, who will buy them? Well, it is possible that obligated entities who have not been able to adhere to the limits will have no option but to go to the market and buy these carbon credits, which is the whole idea. That is, some people will be needing to buy, some people will be able to sell, and therefore you have a market. But the fear in the market is, what if supply outstrips demand? What will happen? The prices of carbon credits will crash. Now, because of this fear, this very fear might deter companies not to undertake activities that cut down emissions. So this is one very big challenge. And this fear is not completely unfounded also. Some people may remember that earlier we had this PAT scheme, this PAT scheme, this Perform, Achieve and Trade scheme of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which was meant only for energy efficiency, purely for energy efficiency. There again, it was a cap and trade system where the BEE set limits for the electricity consumption for various industries, and if you did better than that, you will get E-certs, energy saving certificates, which you can trade in the market. Those E-certs will be bought by those companies which have not been able to meet those limits, and so therefore there is a market and they will buy. The experience with this PAT scheme has been by and large satisfactory, but not something that inspires confidence, because prices of E-certs crashed and then the government came and fixed a floor price, and the experience in the last several months is that E-certs are trading at the floor price. So the fear that the demand for carbon credits might be very, very low compared with the supply is a very real fear, and this is one thing that the Government of India will need to meet. This is something the government should do something to give confidence to the players that there will be good demand also. Now, this is about carbon credits. Well, in the case of green credits, it's purely voluntary. That is, the government is not imposing an obligation on any entity, any sector, or any company to generate green credits. Green credits, as we saw in the previous video, is when you save on, let's say, consumption of water, when you grow trees. This is beyond carbon emissions, carbon dioxide emissions, and getting to other areas like tree plantation, sustainable agriculture, water, air pollution control, and so on and so forth. So if you do better there, you will get green credits, and those green credits can be bought by someone else who's voluntarily committed himself to doing a certain level of air pollution control or water consumption or something like that, and those people will buy these green credits. That's the whole idea. But since this is purely voluntary, the big question again is, what if there is no demand? I mean, I may be a company, I may have committed myself to cutting down water consumption to a certain level, but if I'm not able to do it, what is the obligation on me to go to the market and buy green credits? This is purely voluntary. The biggest challenge in evolution of a vibrant Indian carbon markets and the Indian market for green credits is the assurance that there will be demand for these two instruments. The government will have to do something about this. Nothing has been said in the two notifications about creation of demand. Maybe that will come later. The government could, for example, say that, well, if it falls below a certain point, the government itself could buy these credits. Such a mechanism has been tried and tested before. Unless the government comes and does something like that, it will not inspire confidence in the players to go and generate these credits. That is the first challenge. The second big challenge will come when the government tries to fix these limits. Now, that is a very contentious issue. To take an example that we gave just now, if the government says we are fixing a limit of 2 tons of carbon dioxide emissions, that is, you are allowed to emit up to 2 tons of carbon dioxide per every ton of steel produced, then, in the market, there are cement factories that are old, that are new, that have different technologies, that have different kinds of raw material coming in, particularly coal, limestone. So the production will vary, and there will be protests against such a limit. It is always a very contentious issue. Many experts have said this. Now, the setting of these limits or the baseline is an exercise that is not easily done anywhere in the world, and certainly India will face that problem. Yes, it was done in the case of this PAT scheme that I spoke about just now of the BEE, but that was only, in a very small situation where the obligated entities were not so many, and it was only for electricity consumption. But when it comes to carbon credit, it's a much bigger market, much bigger deal here. Setting limits sectorally and within companies will be a big challenge, and there will be always lots of disputes around it. How the government will go about it, we will only have to wait and see. So these are the two major challenges that the government will face when it tries to evolve an Indian carbon market and a market for green credits in the years to come. But there are a few other issues as well. The big question is whether to allow a secondary market for carbon credits or not. That is, are you going to allow in speculators? Can I, as an investor who has nothing to do, I'm not an obligated entity, but I, as an investor, like I go and buy shares in a market, can I go to the market, buy carbon credits, hold it for some time and try to sell it for a higher price? Will I be allowed to do speculation? Is there a secondary market for carbon credits? Now, there are positives and negatives of both. If you allow speculators in, it will add depth to the market. But then the flip side is, the high price of carbon credits that the market will see, the benefit of it will not go to the person, to the entity that generates these carbon credits. The whole idea is to reward the person who does better in terms of emission reductions, so that he's encouraged further to do more such activities. But if the benefit of high prices in the market goes to the speculators, then it does not serve our purpose. So this will have to be thought through. There are positives and negatives on either side. This will have to be very carefully thought through. As a corollary of this, the other big question is, do we or do we not allow derivatives in carbon credits? That is, will there be futures and options market for carbon credits? This is a very big issue. And if there is one, who will regulate it? We just saw in the case of energy trading, a big contentious issue blew up between two regulators, the CERC, the electricity regulator, and the market regulator, SEBI, as to who will control which aspects of electricity trading. So much so that even after Supreme Court has come up with a determination, this market has not evolved yet. We still do not have derivatives in energy trading. Again, there are pros and cons. The question is whether we should allow derivatives or not. There are many regulatory issues to be thought through, but then one should assume fairly that these are teething problems that can only be expected when you are bringing in a new market, that too something as new as carbon credits and green credits. These teething problems will always be there, and we have very wise and intelligent people sitting there to looking at all these things. So one assumes that these problems will soon be solved and we will have a vibrant Indian carbon markets. On that note, thank you. Goodbye. For more videos on India's green transition journey, please do subscribe.